Weight is no object to me. I suspend all gravity by placing a small wire around an object. This fascinating quote is one of the anti-gravity correlatives compiled by late alternative investigator Jerry Decker. It is said to have been taken from an 1890 airship contact case, one of a series of events referred to that as the Great 19th Century Airship Wave in the book Free Energy Pioneer, John Ward Keely, by author Theo Pagemans. These mysterious airships were essentially the UFOs of the late 1800s, decades before flying saucer and crescent-shaped UFOs were burned into the collective consciousness, beginning with the Roswell crash of 1947. Also curious is that these unknown crafts were sighted during Keely's later years and seemed to decline after his death in 1898. According to Decker, the quote is a description of the aerial suspension and propulsion system of one of the alleged airships. This wire, obviously energized in some way, enabled the contraption to float in the air as a ship floats on water. But more importantly, the quote is undeniably reminiscent of accounts of Keely's own gold, silver, and platinum wire called the Trexar. This wire is said to have conveyed Keely's acoustic force from the source of vibration to either an engine or to a heavy mass which was to be moved, lifted, or even suspended in the air via levitation. It says here that he transmits vibrations along a wire, connected at one end with a vibratory machine which is the source of power, and at its other end with an engine or cannon, as the case may be, which is operated by such vibratory power. Now, of course, when we see reference to wires, we typically think of electricity. But thinking back to the string phones, also known as acoustic phones, that we built and played with as children, we know that sound is able to travel through the string from one cup to the other. In this case, the phone works more efficiently the tighter or tauter the string is. As it says here, this is because the loose string is softer. Soft materials tend to absorb sound more than solid materials. Therefore, a taut string behaves more like a solid, transmitting significantly more sound than it is absorbing as opposed to softer materials. It also implies that a metal wire might be even better at conducting sound than a taut string. This is apparently what Keely realized, as he likely desired a different method to convey vibrations from a source to an object than through the medium of air, as in most of the previously discussed anecdotal accounts of sonic levity and levitation in antiquity. One such account is a Mayan legend which describes the temple complex of Uxmal in the Yucatan Peninsula as having been built by a race of dwarves who were able to move heavy rocks into place by whistling. Another account says that the walls of the ancient city of Thebes were built by Amphion, the son of Jupiter, who moved the large stones to the music of his harp, while the songs drew even stones and beasts after him. Another version claims that when he played loud and clear on his golden lyre, a rock twice as large would follow in his footsteps. And probably the most well-known of these stories is the Tibetan account, in which a couple hundred monks allegedly used a large number of instruments, including 6 huge trumpets called ragdans, which were over 6 feet long. 13 drums made up the remaining instruments, the largest of which were 3 feet in diameter and weighed over 300 pounds. The sound, which was described in the account as unbelievable noise, from the combination of these massive instruments and all 200 plus monks chanting and vocalizing, was directed through the air to the target stone. Additionally, in author Shirley Andrews' books on Atlantis, she describes Atlanteans loudly vocalizing, percussing drums and cymbals, and powerfully stamping the ground with their feet, all the while dancing around huge boulders to raise them from the ground. This sonic technique allegedly advanced to the point where these brute force acoustic methods were replaced with huge gongs, which could be very precisely tuned to the stones to be moved. An element of intense collective mental concentration by the groups is mentioned in both the Tibetan and Atlantean accounts, which reputedly focused and directed the immense acoustic energy which was being generated all around them. These and similar results were seemingly also achieved by Keely in his experiments many centuries later. His novel contribution to this already incredible concept and technique was the use of a wire as a conduit for the vibrations instead of the air and ground. The following excerpts detail an account of this curious wire in action. One of Keely's scientific experiments is to put a small wire around an iron cylinder that weighs several hundred weight. I assume this is several hundred pounds. And when the force runs through the wire, to lift the cylinder upon one finger and carry it as easily as if it were a piece of cork. And also, not long ago, he moved single-handedly a 500 horsepower vibratory engine from one part of his shop to another. Astounded engineers declared that they could not have moved it without a derrick. But the most startling mention of the wire pertaining to this study claims that, in demonstrating what seems to be the overcoming of gravity for aerial navigation, Mr. Keely uses a model of an airship weighing about 8 pounds, which, when the differentiated wire of silver and platinum was attached to it, communicating with a sympathetic transmitter, rose, descended, and remained stationary midway, the motion as gentle as that of thistledown floating in the air. Apparently, the airship in the 1890 case and Keely's model airship were using wires for the exact same purpose. So the main questions are, how did only a wire accomplish such incredible actions? And what physical characteristics would be needed for such an acoustic wire in particular? Well, one thing we do know is that Keely's wire was made from 3 different metals: gold, silver, and platinum. So let's take a look at the properties which determine a material's ability to transmit sound, and then compare that to the physical and acoustic properties that these 3 particular metals exhibit. Sound transmission material choice, at least as far as sound speed, is a delicate balance between its elasticity and density. Elasticity is also known as modulus of elasticity, or Young's modulus. Sound speed increases with elasticity, which is defined as a material's ability to recover from deformation. Conversely, sound speed decreases with density, as heavier molecules tend to move more slowly overall. Therefore, if 2 materials have the same density, then the sound will travel faster through the material with a greater Young's modulus of elasticity. But if 2 materials have the same elasticity, the speed of sound will be slower through the material with greater density. And it's the same for the amplitude of a sound wave, which also decreases with increasing density. Gold and platinum are amongst the densest of the metals, with values of 19.3 grams per cubic centimeter and 21.45 grams per cubic centimeter respectively, both of which are close to osmium, the densest stable element, which sits at a value of 22.59 grams per cubic centimeter. Silver, by contrast, is around half of these values at 10.49 grams per cubic centimeter. However, silver is well known to be an excellent conductor of electricity and heat. As we know, both heat and sound can be quantum mechanically represented as phonons. Hence, we might deduce that silver will be just as good a conductor of sound as it is of heat. Overall, the platinum, while the densest of the 3, also has the greatest elasticity. Apparently, this elasticity more than compensates for its density, as sound has the greatest velocity through platinum out of the three metals. But other than these basic physical properties of the three metals, this trillion wire was purportedly able to greatly multiply the input vibrations, generating frequencies many orders higher. Some information from Keely's research in this regard includes the following. It says here that the Trexar is this wire composed of a first section of silver, a second section of gold, and a third section of platinum, all uniform in size, which is used as a conductor in vibratory transmission and for the multiplication of vibratory frequencies. Silver represents the third, gold the sixth, and platinum the ninth in their respective relative molecular oscillating ranges. Differential molecular volume is required to equate differentiation of sympathetic flows. This condition is satisfied by the Trexar. Two differing molecular densities, represented by two different mediums, make possible the harmonious adjustment of the thirds. Using the second node of platinum raises the frequency to the 81st power, or far beyond computation, and this represents the effect of only two nodes. It also says that transmitting the order of sympathetic atomic vibration through a three-node transmitter induces interatomic percussion, resulting in triple atomic subdivision, not by oscillation of the atoms across their diameter, but by infinite acceleration of the atomic film or etheric capsule, and at the same time permitting the extension of atomic vibration far enough to set free the gaseous atomic element. This last must refer to the force generated by multiplication of vibratory frequencies in the Trexar, as used with the different node combinations. And so clearly more research needs to be conducted on the concept of not only the Trexar, but perhaps even the atomic structure of matter itself. But the gist of it is a wire which could not only transmit acoustic vibrations with little attenuation, but which could also apparently increase the input frequencies by many orders of magnitude, and could do so in specific ratios of 3, 6, and 9, thus creating an extremely high frequency chord. We will recall that Keely stated that all objects have a specific mass chord. As it says here in the book, Universal Laws Never Before Revealed, Keely's Secrets by author Dale Pond, all aggregated bodies are chords of vibrations. This concept of the mass chord is very similar to the concept of all objects possessing a resonant frequency, although a mass chord is likely far more descriptive and correct, especially when considering the three-dimensional properties of matter. And so it would certainly follow that all objects will have numerous frequencies that they would resonate with, rather than just a singular frequency. Also, according to the book, Keely was able to obtain similar frequency multiplication outside of using the wire, using what are called progressive resonators. These resonators usually took the form of pipes or metal cladding plates. As it says here, one plate of a certain fundamental frequency will be tuned so as to activate another plate above it, which possessed a higher fundamental frequency. This plate would in turn activate another plate with an even higher fundamental. By continuing in this manner with up to 40 total plates, it is said that Keely could convert acoustic frequencies from the audio range to frequencies far into the X-ray and gamma frequency ranges. With this in mind, when we think back to the summum principle of vibration, we are reminded of an object vibrating at an ever-increasing rate, and in so doing, becoming more and more intangible, passing through all of the frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum, from the infrared all the way through the gamma radiation ranges in the process. In continuing to increase, the object would begin to partially phase out of our reality, eventually phasing out of our perceived reality almost entirely, as its frequency becomes still higher. And it follows that a mass with even partial immateriality could still be physically handled, but would be significantly lighter in apparent weight. Some have even speculated that this partial intangibility is the cause of some of the stones in certain megaliths being literally fused together. As a greater percentage of its molecular makeup becomes increasingly immaterial, it might become lighter still, such that it could actually be levitated by the centrifugal force of the Earth, as postulated in the video Gravitational Gravitic Levitation, or perhaps light enough to be caught up in an acoustic vortex, as postulated in the video The Tibetan Levitation Technique, Acoustically Induced Vortex Lift. As the vibrations of the object slow back down to equilibrium, the object will regain its full materiality and simultaneously its full apparent weight. But due to the latent effect noted by N.A. Kozyrev, this return to materiality does not occur immediately, but rather gradually and incrementally. It seems that in using this method, care would also have to be taken such that the object's molecules would not permanently disperse. Otherwise, it would never again be able to regain its original form and would instead be dissolved into its primordial constituents. As incredible as it sounds, Keely was apparently able to achieve all of this: levity, levitation, as well as disintegration of matter, all using sound and vibratory force, first conducted through various resonators, and eventually through his perfected Trexar wire. And so the question is how can we begin to attempt to duplicate some of these results? Here we can see the familiar setup to test acoustic vibratory force, involving a 440 Hz steel tuning fork and a hanging table tennis ball contacting one of the tuning fork's tines. A solenoid is then slid over the other tine. When the solenoid is energized by a 440 Hz waveform from a frequency generator and 35-volt driving circuit, the entire tuning fork resonates, and the ball is periodically repelled. The next clip here shows a modification of this experiment to demonstrate the transmission of acoustic force through a wire. The second tuning fork also has a frequency of 440 Hz, and so it is primed to resonate with the first. As we can see, without the wire, there's little to no transmission of vibrations between the forks sufficient to propel the ball. But when a steel wire is connected between the two forks, the sound can then travel from the active fork to the passive one, which in turn propels the ball, albeit with significantly less force than in the previous clip. This experiment proves that a wire can indeed transmit vibrations of the type not just heard, as in an acoustic phone, but it can also exert physical force in a very practical way. Unfortunately, I had to limit the size of the coil so that it would fit between the fork's tines without attenuation of the vibrations from physical contact. A small coil equates to a small coil resistance and a greater driving current. This causes the driving transistor to heat up fairly quickly despite a freewheeling protection diode. But what I found is that it's not really about overwhelming the system with raw power. Instead, it is better to allow great energy to develop more slowly via resonance. This means that a much lower amount of power can be applied over a longer time, reducing ohmic heating in the circuitry. But in a resonant system, lower power over a longer time can have the same result as higher power over a shorter time. Reducing the voltage from 35 volts to 25 actually worked better, as it reduced heating, enabling me to leave the circuit running for much longer. This in turn allowed enough time for both forks to develop energy through resonance, Also interesting is that if we listen closely, the greatest vibrational response at the receiving fork occurs when overtones are generated. These overtones are higher frequencies which accompany the base 440 Hz tone. It is unclear as if they are harmonic overtones or inharmonic ones. To clarify these terms, it says here that tones that cannot be multiplied or divided by a whole number are known as inharmonic overtones or partial tones. When you combine a number of these inharmonic overtones, it tends to sound noisy. Non-fundamental tones that are multiplied by fractional amounts and not whole numbers are called partials. I need to purchase tone analyzing software for future experiments, which can help to better determine the nature of these overtones. But going by my musically amateur ear, the accompanying overtones are likely partials. And we can see that the generation of these partials along with the bass tone developed a significantly greater vibratory force. These principles allow us a small glimpse into the concept of how Keely's wire was able to generate higher frequencies from a bass tone, which will be created in addition to that tone. The other piece to the puzzle of multiplying frequencies appears to lie in utilizing combinations of various metals of differing molecular weights, thus making this process much more sophisticated and ultimately potentially much more effective. We can see this principle again in the linear Tibetan account, in which both the gong and the string instrument were each apparently also constructed of 3 different metals. The account further clarifies that the resulting sound wave was of high enough frequency that it was inaudible. So there's definitely a common thread here. It's certainly unfortunate that we don't have any information on the wire composition from the previously mentioned 1890 airship case. So in summary, Keely's system involved a source of vibration, a trunnion wire as a conduit for the acoustic vibratory force, and a receiving or destination mass, which was tuned to the same musical chord and harmonics as the source. This unique wire would also greatly multiply the operating frequencies, allowing for tremendous vibrational energies to be developed for use in running various devices such as a vibratory cannon or vibratory engine. It could also be used to resonate a mass at such frequencies that it could become lighter or even levitate entirely, and all without using intolerably loud audio sounds in the ambient air that are described in the Jarl Tibetan account and others. Thus we can see the tremendous value of such a wire in the ultimate perfection and realization of sonic levitation technology. Looking back on some of the ancient references, it appears that sound may have been used in different ways, including not only levitation, but also sonic levity, acoustic lubrication, and acoustic propulsion. And if so, then is it possible that they also use oscillating and vibrating strings or wires to transmit the acoustic forces, just as Keely did? We may also recall in the past video ancient acoustic cutting, the idea in which an oscillating string could have been used to cut into stone, similarly to a modern-day wire saw. Additionally, remembering the discussion of acoustic telephones earlier in this presentation, we might even wonder if civilizations of antiquity could have used similar principles in a type of ancient telecommunications technology. Interestingly, voice pipes or speaking tubes are still used today by the Navy as a reliable, non-electronic method of communication, which would still operate even under an EMP attack. These devices use a pipe to connect 2 acoustic cones rather than a taut string or wire. It is certainly not beyond the realm of possibility that such principles and methods could have been used for distant communication in ancient times. So we can reasonably conclude that significant acoustic energy can indeed travel through a wire, and that it may even be possible to multiply acoustic frequencies in the audio range by up to 16 or more orders of magnitude. In the upcoming video, which will be entitled Sonic Levity, is a vibrating mass easier to lift? We will explore the concept of vibration to induce levity or levitation in a test mass, as well as how we can begin to devise actual experiments in order to test this intriguing concept. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned.